Shaggy sparked drug accusations that spread through PTA meetings like wildfire. Muhammad Ali got yanked off air for teaching kids to question authority. Fat Albert tackled heroin before the cereal bowl emptied, and that's not even why networks refuse to air it today. These cartoons weren't made for children. The Schoolhouse Rock gang. Educational shorts that ran from 1973 to 1984 might seem like an odd place to start a list about controversial cartoons, but this cheerful collection of singing grammar lessons and dancing multiplication tables stirred up more trouble than its catchy tunes would suggest. The cultural context here matters enormously. In the 1970s, most people expected cartoons to deliver pure entertainment, a sugar rush escape from school and homework. Schoolhouse Rock shattered that unwritten rule by smuggling education into Saturday morning television. That bold decision put the show squarely in the crosshairs of critics from every political angle. The creators achieved something genuinely innovative with these shorts. They took complex subjects like constitutional law, multiplication tables, and grammar mechanics and transformed them into catchy, memorable experiences. A whole generation learned how a bill becomes a law not from a civics textbook, but from a tune featuring a piece of legislation sitting on the Capitol steps. The production team understood something powerful about learning through music that educators still try to replicate today. But here's where things got messy. Conservative groups in the late 70s accused certain segments of promoting secular humanism and undermining traditional values. Some Southern stations viewed the grammar and science segments as subtly pushing a worldview that clashed with religious education. They wanted their kids learning letters and calculations without any philosophical undertones. Several affiliates flat out refused to air the more controversial segments, deeming them inappropriate for impressionable young minds. Progressive critics launched their own complaints. They argued that episodes like The Great American Melting Pot presented a whitewashed version of American history that glossed over immigrant struggles and minority experiences. The song celebrated diversity, but did so in a way that some felt erased the real pain and sacrifice behind the American dream. The right attacked it for promoting immigration, while the left condemned it for romanticizing brutal history. That kind of two-front war gets a show noticed for all the wrong reasons. Schoolhouse Rock survived because its educational mission proved ultimately unimpeachable. You can argue about the messaging all day, but at the end of that day, kids learned something. The controversy actually highlighted how powerful animation could be as a teaching tool, and that scared certain gatekeepers. When your cartoon makes children think for themselves, you've crossed a line that some people never wanted crossed. Still, compared to what's coming, these sins seem relatively mild, but don't get comfortable because the monsters arrive next. Godzilla and Godzuki. The king of monsters himself stomped onto Saturday morning television in 1978, bringing his annoying nephew Godzuki along for the ride. Hanna-Barbera expected a guaranteed hit. Take the world's most famous giant lizard, slap him on children's television, and watch the ratings explode. Instead, the network got an explosion of angry phone calls and complaint letters. The timing couldn't have worked out worse for a show built around city-smashing destruction. The late 70s saw growing environmental awareness, lingering nuclear anxiety from the Cold War, and increasing concern about violence in children's media. Godzilla stepped right into that minefield with his radioactive breath blazing. Ambition drove this show forward in ways that deserve credit. The Calico research crew gave the series a pseudo-scientific framework, and the monster battles delivered genuine spectacle for Saturday morning standards. Godzuki, the bumbling sidekick, clearly aimed to soften the edges and add comic relief. For monster-loving kids, this show fulfilled a dream. Here stood Godzilla, their hero from Japanese cinema, now a weekly presence in their living rooms. Critics weren't having any of it. Parents' groups claimed that Godzilla's roars and city-busting battles gave children nightmares and encouraged aggressive behavior. The radioactive breath, the toppling buildings, the constant theme of destruction, all of it struck them as too intense for young viewers. Child psychologists appeared on talk shows warning about the psychological damage these images could cause. These weren't empty threats. In the UK and Australia, broadcast authorities reviewed the show after waves of complaints and proceeded to slash episodes for what they called intense peril and destructive themes. A deeper layer of criticism also emerged. Environmental groups pointed out the irony of taking Godzilla, a creature originally created as a metaphor for nuclear devastation in post-war Japan, and transforming him into a friendly superhero. They accused the show of trivializing the real dangers of atomic energy and natural disasters. One episode where Godzilla stops a volcanic eruption drew particular fire for making catastrophe into cheap entertainment. Godzilla proved you can't import a metaphor for nuclear horror into Saturday morning without consequences. Several markets pushed the show out of morning time slots, deeming it more appropriate for older kids in the afternoon. Hanna-Barbera tried toning down the destruction and adding environmental messages, but the damage to the show's reputation stuck. Ironically, all that controversy made Godzilla cooler to kids. Nothing sells like forbidden fruit. The show's troubled run actually paved the way for more mature animated content down the line, but in its own time, it burned too hot to handle. Now let's talk about a show that literally sent kids to the emergency room. Ernie Develin from Devlin. Motorcycle riding hero Ernie Develin roared onto screens in 1974, directly inspired by Evel Knievel, the real-life stuntman whose death-defying jumps made him a national icon. Hanna-Barbera figured if kids loved watching Knievel on the news, they'd go crazy for a cartoon version. What the creators didn't anticipate was that kids would try to become the cartoon version. The early 70s marked the peak of the Daredevil craze. Evel Knievel appeared everywhere, on lunchboxes, in toy stores, jumping over cars and canyons on live television. He embodied the ultimate cool, and Devlin aimed to capture that lightning in a bottle for the Saturday morning crowd. Real appeal drove this show's initial success. Ernie Develin toured with his family circus as a young stunt rider, and the premise allowed for plenty of exciting motorcycle action, tight family dynamics, and the glamour of show business. For kids who dreamed of being fearless, Develin delivered aspirational television. Then the emergency room reports started rolling in. Hospitals across the country noted a spike in injuries involving children attempting to mimic the show's stunts. Kids built ramps in their backyards, rode bikes off furniture, and treated their neighborhoods like stunt courses. The phrase copycat injuries became a staple of news coverage, and soon Develin became public enemy one. For parents' organizations, the network responded swiftly but ineffectively. Producers scrambled to insert safety disclaimers at the end of episodes, with Ernie Develin himself telling viewers not to try this at home. Critics argued that showing the stunts at all, even with a warning, planted the idea firmly in young minds. The disclaimer worked like a band-aid on a broken leg. Several local affiliates pulled the show entirely, and some markets refused to air it from the start, branding it too dangerous for young viewers. Develin crashed after a single season, becoming a cautionary tale for the entire industry about the power of imitation. The creators wanted to capture the thrill of the stunt world, but ended up at ground zero of parental panic. This show proved that in the 1970s, even cartoon heroes could crash and burn before the final credits rolled. Its legacy lives on as a warning label that every action-oriented children's program has had to reckon with ever since. Speaking of shows that revealed uncomfortable truths to kids, our next entry took viewers to the bottom of the ocean and the depths of despair. The crew of Sealab 20-20. An underwater research station became the setting for one of Saturday morning's darkest experiments in 1972. If you thought all 70s cartoons delivered bright, silly, consequence-free entertainment, this Hanna-Barbera series would have hit you like a rogue tidal wave. Scientists aboard the underwater base dealt with environmental threats, equipment failures, and the ever-present possibility of disaster. This science fiction premise came with a conscience, and it scared the living daylights out of parents and censors alike. The environmental movement had gained real traction by this point, with Earth Day established just 2 years earlier, and growing public awareness of pollution, resource depletion, and ecological collapse. Sealab 2020 tapped directly into those anxieties, presenting them to children in animated form. Ambition and honesty drove this show's storytelling. Unlike other Saturday morning fare, Sealab's dangers came from real headlines. Oil spills, nuclear meltdowns, sabotage, threats of mass extinction all made appearances. The heroes didn't always win by punching their way out. They had to make tough ethical choices and sometimes deal with loss and failure. For kids raised on Scooby-Doo mysteries that always wrapped up neatly, this represented a massive gear shift towards something more mature and thought-provoking. That maturity came at a steep cost. Parents flooded broadcasters with complaints that the show delivered content too intense, too depressing, and psychologically damaging. Advocacy organizations argued that the doomsday tone could cause anxiety and nightmares in young viewers. In some markets, affiliates pulled episodes or shifted the show to less visible time slots. International censors proved even harsher. In the UK and Australia, Sealab 20-20 faced heavy edits or outright bans for disaster-related trauma, especially following real-world tragedies like oil spills or mining accidents. Germany and New Zealand pulled one episode featuring a potential nuclear meltdown entirely, deeming it too frightening for young viewers. Sealab 2020 arrived too far ahead of its time. The show told kids the truth about environmental dangers and paid the price for its honesty. A cult following emerged among viewers who wanted more than slapstick, and the series eventually inspired the wildly irreverent parody Sealab 2021 decades later. But in its own era, Sealab proved that the scariest monsters are sometimes the ones humanity creates itself. Now let's shift from environmental doom to supernatural panic with a show about 5 famous brothers, the Jackson 5 and the Jackson 5IV. Cartoon versions of Michael, Jermaine, Tito, Marlon, and Jackie Jackson hit Saturday morning screens from 1971 to 1973. On paper, this looked like a slam dunk. Take the world's most popular pop group, turn them into colorful animated characters, and let them sing, dance, and solve mysteries. What could possibly go wrong? As it turned out, Just about everything. The peak of Jackson family fame coincided with simmering tensions around race, religion, and representation in American media. The Jackson 5 had become crossover superstars beloved by audiences of all backgrounds, but putting them in animated form opened up a whole new set of controversies. Obvious strengths powered this show's initial appeal. Positive black role models on Saturday morning television remained rare, and the Jackson brothers offered young viewers characters who were talented, charismatic, and fun. The music hooked audiences immediately, the animation popped with vibrant color, and the storylines promised adventure and excitement. Problems started with the show's heavy reliance on supernatural elements. Several episodes featured fortune tellers, curses, voodoo, and what conservative groups called witchcraft for children. A fortune-telling monkey became a recurring character, and storylines often veered into mystical territory. In the American South, this poured gasoline on a fire. Conservative and religious organizations accused the show of promoting occult practices and pagan beliefs. Affiliates in several states yanked the series mid-season, citing its bad influence on young minds. International controversy spread quickly. In the UK and parts of Africa, episodes that touched on witchcraft, voodoo, or spiritual themes faced heavy edits or outright bans. Jamaica removed an entire arc involving Caribbean folklore from the broadcast schedule, with censors citing cultural insensitivity and dangerous stereotypes. The show's attempts to incorporate diverse magical traditions backfired spectacularly in the context of religious panic. Critics within the black community found themselves divided. Some loved seeing the Jacksons as animated heroes, but others worried the show trivialized real-life struggles by focusing on celebrity over substance. Op-eds asked whether the show depicted black excellence or just sold a fantasy that ignored the actual challenges facing African-American youth. The Jackson 5 Hive became a cult classic despite, or perhaps because of, its controversies. This show proved that even the most innocent-seeming entertainment could unleash a tidal wave of outrage when it touched on themes of race, religion, and representation. Today, a show featuring this much voodoo imagery would face an entirely different but equally fierce backlash, making it a perfect example of 70s content that simply could not exist now. Next, we're climbing into the mystery machine for a ride that proved anything but harmless. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. The most unlikely troublemakers in animation history emerged from Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, and its numerous 1970s spin-offs. You might think this duo seems as harmless as a soggy Scooby snack, but in the 70s, these meddling kids had parents and watchdog groups howling at the moon. Early rumblings of what would become the satanic panic of the 1980s had already begun shaping parental anxiety. Dungeons & Dragons hadn't even hit mainstream yet, but concerns about occult influence on children were building steadily. Into this nervous environment rolled the Mystery Machine, with its parade of ghosts, witches, and haunted houses. Brilliance drove the show's formula. The monsters always turned out fake, the villains always proved human, and the mysteries always yielded to logic and teamwork. In theory, the show actually debunked supernatural beliefs by revealing every phantom as a guy in a mask. For kids, it delivered endless entertainment, a perfect blend of spooky atmosphere and comedic relief. Critics saw something else entirely. Conservative watchdogs didn't care that the ghosts turned out fake. They cared that children encountered occult imagery every Saturday morning. Ghosts, witches, seances, haunted houses. The iconography triggered alarm bells regardless of the rationalist ending. Religious organizations in the Midwest organized boycotts, demanding networks pull all programming that glorifies fear, deception, and the occult. Shaggy attracted his own controversy. Rumors flew that his constant hunger, his laid-back attitude, his seeming disconnection from reality served as coded references to marijuana use. Some parent-teacher associations demanded the character get toned down or eliminated entirely. His original name allegedly started as Waggy, and conspiracy theories about hidden drug messages spread through PTA meetings like wildfire. Whether any truth supported these claims, the perception alone caused trouble. Violence complaints also mounted, however cartoonish the action appeared. Bonks on the head, trapdoors, near drownings, wild chase scenes. British stations began editing out the scariest sequences, while American censors debated adding warnings for intense peril. Even the seemingly innocent act of Shaggy and Scooby hiding in a closet got analyzed for subtext that the creators almost certainly never intended. Scooby-Doo survived every attempt at censorship through sheer popularity and clever adaptation. The show morphed, added educational messages, softened its edges when necessary, and kept rolling. But the controversy only boosted its legendary status. This cartoon didn't just spook fictional ghosts, it spooked real censors, and somehow that made the show more unstoppable than ever. Now let's boldly go where Saturday morning had never gone before. Captain Kirk and Spock in Star Trek, the animated series. The final frontier arrived on Saturday mornings from 1973 to 1974, bringing Captain Kirk, Spock, and the Enterprise crew to a new generation of viewers. If you thought Star Trek's only controversy involved Spock's haircut, you haven't examined what the show put on children's television. Star Trek's original live-action series had already pushed boundaries with its progressive messages about race, war, and humanity's future. The animated continuation aimed to bring those themes to a younger audience. What network executives didn't fully appreciate was just how provocative those themes could prove when aimed at children. Refusing to dumb itself down gave this show its strength. The writers tackled racial prejudice with an episode about a species divided by skin color. Captain Kirk squared off against genocidal computers, prompting philosophical debates about artificial intelligence and morality. The series explored alien religions and spirituality with nuance that challenged young viewers to think beyond their own cultural assumptions. One episode crossed every line the censors had drawn. The Magics of Megas 2 featured the Enterprise crew encountering a being who looked suspiciously like the devil himself and visiting a planet where magic functioned as reality. For some viewers, this represented creative science fiction. For others, it promoted Satanism to children at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Television stations in the Bible Belt refused to air the episode. International broadcasters in Germany and the UK skipped it entirely, citing inappropriate religious themes. Problems didn't stop there. Episodes dealing with death, violence, or what censors considered overly mature philosophical content got pulled from rotation or delayed to later time slots. The show even dipped into Cold War paranoia, with alien plots that mirrored anxieties about nuclear annihilation. In an era when Saturday morning was supposed to offer a haven from adult problems, Star Trek served up existential crises alongside breakfast cereal. Star Trek, the animated series, proved too smart and too challenging for its time slot. The backlash clipped its wings but couldn't kill its spirit. Some affiliates only aired pre-approved episodes. Others demanded disclaimers and parental guidance warnings. Yet the controversy built a cult following that inspired future generations of storytellers. This show didn't just seek out new worlds, it discovered new frontiers in Saturday morning outrage. Today, that Devil episode would likely spark boycotts from multiple directions simultaneously. Coming up, a show that took political satire where animation had never dared to go. The Boyle Family from Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. Harry Boyle and his dysfunctional household brought adult animation to primetime from 1972 to 1974, years before The Simpsons ever existed. If you think mature animated comedy started in Springfield, you haven't met this Hanna-Barbera creation. This show aired right after the local news, when families still gathered around the television together, and it proceeded to take aim at everything sacred in American life: the Vietnam War, hippie counterculture, women's liberation, suburban paranoia, and the generation gap, tearing families apart. In the early 70s, that approach made it public enemy for just about everybody. Harry embodied the quintessential everyman dad, a relic of the Eisenhower era, clashing nightly with his counterculture kids and their radical friends. His daughter attended women's liberation meetings. His son participated in anti-war protests. His neighbor remained convinced communists hid behind every mailbox. Every episode poked the bear of American politics with a sharp stick. Satirizing everyone equally gave this show its brilliance. Nobody escaped unscathed. Harry's conservatism got mocked just as thoroughly as his children's idealism. The result delivered genuinely even-handed comedy that found absurdity across the political spectrum. For a brief window, this kind of balanced satire could exist on American television. That balance meant the show accumulated enemies on all sides. Conservative viewers blasted it as subversive, un-American, and an insult to decency. Letters poured into network offices accusing the series of promoting disrespect for authority, mocking the military, and brainwashing children with radical ideas. One infamous storyline featured Harry joining a citizens' militia to spy on his own neighbors, only to face public humiliation. The satire cut razor sharp, and for many viewers, it landed way too close for comfort. Progressives weren't happy either. They criticized the show for not going far enough, for treating youth movements with mockery rather than respect. Feminist leaders took issue with Harry's frequent dismissal of his wife's ambitions. Civil rights advocates accused the show of caricaturing serious struggles for laughs. Wait Till Your Father Gets Home proved too political for Saturday morning and too outrageous for the after-dinner crowd. Some affiliates refused to air the most controversial episodes. Others edited dialogue or yanked entire installments. The show faded quickly, undone by its willingness to tackle hot-button issues that most cartoons wouldn't touch. But its legacy echoes in every boundary-pushing animated sitcom that followed. This series proved that animation could deliver social commentary, and sometimes the most dangerous thing on television is the truth drawn in Technicolor. Now we're entering the ring with a champion who refused to stay down. Lotta Litter. Let's journey back to November 17, 1973, a time when environmental awareness was reaching fever pitch following the first Earth Day in 1970. It was on this very date that children across America encountered something genuinely unsettling during their Saturday morning cartoon ritual. Lotta Litter, a shape-shifting villainess who would become the embodiment of ecological nightmares. Voiced by the distinctive Rose Marie, Lotta Litter appeared in Yogi's gang with a mission that went far beyond typical cartoon villainy. She wasn't trying to steal jewels or conquer the world. No, her goal was far more insidious. She wanted to trick Yogi Bear and his friends into transforming the pristine Jellystone Park into a wasteland of garbage and filth. Her design featured messy, disheveled elements that symbolized trash accumulation, creating a visual representation of disorder that felt almost invasive. What made Lotta Litter weirdly terrifying wasn't her appearance alone, it was her methodology. She disguised herself to manipulate beloved characters like Yogi and Boo Boo, betraying their trust and leading them down a path of environmental destruction. The episode showed trash piles growing uncontrollably, evoking fears of irreversible damage in young viewers' minds. This messy chaos visualization mirrored broader 1970s eco-cartoons like The Lorax, where pollution was personified to scare kids into environmental consciousness. She reappeared in Balloon Kids, extending her litter-spreading schemes, proving that her threat wasn't just a one-time occurrence, but a recurring nightmare. Her shape-shifting ability added unpredictability, undermining the safety of familiar settings and making children question whether anything was truly as it seemed. Mr. Cheater. On October 20th, 1973, Yogi's gang introduced another villain who would tap into something profoundly unsettling, Mr. Cheater, whose full name was Peter D. Cheater, a swindler whose very existence challenged the foundation of trust. This tall, stout figure with fair skin, a bulbous nose, green unibrow-like hair, and distinctive red-lensed glasses presented himself as a friend to the gang. He wore a red jacket, with dark lapels, pink undershirt, black bow tie, gray pants, and black and white shoes, a costume that evoked the image of a shady con artist or dishonest businessman. His entire aesthetic screamed deception, but the truly terrifying aspect of Mr. Cheater wasn't his appearance, it was his manipulation of the gang's gullibility. He invited Snagglepuss and others aboard their flying ark, attempting to capture it for his global cheating schemes. This subtle betrayal eroded trust within the group, creating an insidious atmosphere where friendship itself became questionable. In a show promoting unity and honesty, his charm disguising malice mirrored real-world scams and tapped into post-Watergate paranoia about dishonesty and corruption. Fan critiques highlight how the episode portrayed the gang as gullible imbeciles, amplifying the unease of vulnerability. This wasn't just about a villain trying to win, it was about how easily good people could be deceived, making betrayal feel like a psychological threat that could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Dread Baron. When Laugh Olympics premiered in 1977, it introduced audiences to a villain who blended humor with something far more sinister. Dread Baron, voiced by John Stevenson, who co-led the villainous Really Rottens team across all 24 episodes of the series. Created as a Dick Dastardly substitute due to potential rights issues with Hedder Quigley Productions, Dread Baron wore a Webbie German flying ace uniform with a thin, curled mustache, embodying melodramatic villainy in a way that felt both comical and genuinely unsettling. He was later revealed as Dick Dastardly's brother in Marvel Comics Sector 13, adding layers to his backstory. Paired with Mumbly, a Muttley analog, Dread Baron's schemes involved elaborate traps, aerial sabotage, and relentless cheating in Olympic-style competitions set in locations ranging from the Swiss Alps to the moon. What made him weirdly terrifying was the dissonance he created, sabotage and vicious competition in what should have been fun, lighthearted settings. He was disgusted by fair wins and thrived on making victories feel precarious. His weird terror arose from blending humor with malice, creating a villain whose melodrama couldn't quite mask his underlying menace. Fans noted his boo-hiss characteristics and how his creepy uniform evoked historical villains, making him a figure that occupied an uncomfortable space between cartoon comedy and genuine threat. Queen Nemone. Queen Nemone, the tyrannical ruler of the City of Gold, renamed Xandor in the animated adaptation, represented a different kind of terror when she appeared in Filmation's Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle. Adapted from Edgar Rice Burroughs' 1931 novel Tarzan and the City of Gold, she embodied a chilling mixture of beauty, madness, and ruthless ambition. Appearing in 3 episodes across the series' run, Queen Nemone was depicted as a tall, elegant woman with long dark hair, pale skin, and sharp features that conveyed haughtiness and menace. She wore a flowing purple gown with red accents, a tiara, and jewelry evoking ancient Egyptian or Roman influences, reinforcing her archaic tyranny. What made Queen Nemone genuinely unsettling was her orchestration of gladiatorial fights reminiscent of ancient spectacles, introducing themes of mortality and control into Saturday morning programming. In Tarzan and the City of Gold, September 11, 1976, she imprisoned Tarzan and Phobeg, forcing them into arena battles. Her calm oversight of these violent spectacles added psychological terror, treating lives as entertainment, often accompanied by her fierce pet lion Belthar. She exuded authority that felt simultaneously regal and dangerous. Voiced by Joan Gerber in her first 2 appearances and Hetty Lynn Hertz in her 3rd, her commanding and seductive tone shifted to something more mystical, adding variety to her menace. In Tarzan and the Soul Stealer, October 13, 1979, she delved into sorcery, transforming Phobeg into a lion, amplifying dread through supernatural violations of natural order. Bergkatze. Science ninja team Gatchaman introduced Western audiences, through various adaptations, to Berg Katze, a villain whose complexity and unsettling nature went far beyond typical cartoon antagonists. As the second in command of the terrorist organization Galactor under the alien entity Leader X, Katze represented something genuinely disturbing: identity itself as a weapon. Born as a fusion of fraternal twins approximately 30 years before the series, Katze was a genetically engineered mutant capable of gender shifting, involuntarily at first during childhood, then mastering the ability as an adult. This instability led to family breakdown. At age 5, the first shift from female to male prompted the parents' divorce, with the father abandoning them due to societal stigma. Visually, Katze's default masculine form featured a purple bodysuit, with matching mask-bearing bat-like ears, a long purple cape with red lining, red gloves, and boots, creating an image that was both theatrical and genuinely menacing. The mask concealed an androgynous face with large lips, long dark blonde hair, and grayish-blue eyes, revealed in episode 102. What made Berg Katze weirdly terrifying was the fluid identity that created an uncanny valley effect, making alliances feel unreliable and identities questionable. This gender-shifting ability enabled masterful disguises and infiltration, fooling even advanced technology. Paired with volatile mood swings and merciless tactics, Katze became a symbol of psychological horror, someone whose very existence challenged fundamental assumptions about identity and stability. Ming the Merciless. In 1979, Filmation's The New Adventures of Flash Gordon introduced a new generation to Ming the Merciless, and what they encountered was a villain who tapped into primal fears of otherness and tyranny. Voiced by Alan Oppenheimer and Vic Perrin in the pilot, Ming was depicted as a brilliant scientist and ruthless warlord ruling the planet Mongo with a vast robot army, drone rockets, armored trains, and enforcers like lizard women and beast men. His appearance featured green skin, pointed ears, a pointed beard, and flamboyant robes, emphasizing his alien otherness in a way that made him feel fundamentally different and threatening. His theatrical flair, barking orders, and manipulating conflicts between Mongo's races created an oddly hypnotic dread that blended camp sensibility with genuine menace. What made Ming weirdly terrifying was his sociopathic megalomania combined with sadistic playfulness, often toying with victims before destruction. His terror lay in his ability to instill division, mirroring real-world fears of tyranny. However, Ming's legacy is complicated. His design has long been criticized for yellow peril stereotypes, drawing from Fu Manchu archetypes. The BBC reported in 2020 that the British Board of Film Classification added warnings to the 1980 film for discriminatory stereotypes, with experts like Dr. Sadia Habib calling it a horrible stereotype of East Asian villainy. The Legion of Doom. When Challenge of the Super Friends premiered in 1978, it introduced something unprecedented: 13 supervillains assembled by Lex Luthor to counter the expanded Justice League, operating from a mobile Hall of Doom in Slaughter Swamp that could fly, submerge, tunnel, and travel through time and space. This collection of antagonists created a new kind of terror through chaotic unpredictability. The roster included Lex Luthor, Brainiac, Bizarro, Black Manta, Captain Cold, Cheetah, Giganta, Gorilla Grodd, Riddler, Scarecrow, Sinestro, Solomon Grundy, and Toyman, each bringing unique powers and psychological profiles. What made the Legion weirdly terrifying wasn't individual members, but their collective unpredictability. They used gadgets like the Dream Machine for mind control, the mutation device for transforming heroes into Bizarros, and the interspatial time conveyor for time travel. Their schemes swung wildly from apocalyptic world destruction to petty pranks, creating a tonal inconsistency that made them feel genuinely unstable. This mix of serious threats and absurd antics evoked unpredictable chaos, amplified by petty infighting among members. Their swampy Vader helmet-inspired base added eerie isolation to an already unsettling group dynamic. Dr. Bigot. On September 8, 1973, Yogi's Gang premiered with Dr. Bigot, perhaps the most unsettling villain in the show's entire run. Not because of supernatural powers or physical threat, but because of what he represented. Voiced by Henry Corden, Dr. Bigot embodied prejudice itself, using a bigot ray, also called the Mindbender, to induce discrimination. His appearance featured a sneering, cape-wearing figure with a large nose and slick hair, but his true horror lay in his methodology. In the episode, he zapped Mr. Cheerful and Yogi Bear, turning them xenophobic. Yogi began ranting against animals, demonstrating how quickly prejudice could corrupt even the most beloved characters. What made Dr. Bigot weirdly terrifying was the blunt way prejudice was portrayed as an invasive force warping friends and loved ones. The idea of a ray that could turn someone you trusted into someone hateful tapped into fears of division and loss. His chemical ray blended hatred and prejudice to bigotize victims psychologically, making intolerance feel omnipresent and inescapable, like an infection that could strike anyone at any moment. Greedy Genie. In The Greedy Genie, the second episode of Yogi's Gang, directed by Charles A. Nichols, audiences encountered a villain who subverted one of childhood's most beloved fantasy figures. Voiced by John Stevenson, the Greedy Genie appeared as a rotund, green-skinned spirit with a turban, striped pants, and pointed shoes, exuding manipulative charm from the moment Yogi's gang rubbed his lamp. But this was no benevolent wish-granter from Aladdin. His powers included granting wishes with a corrupting twist, amplifying desires into excessive greed. A simple request for food became an overwhelming horde that damaged the Ark. His personality was defined by his insatiable mantra, more, which he chanted while encouraging overindulgence. What made the Greedy Genie weirdly terrifying was the psychological horror of twisted wishes, everyday desires becoming nightmarish excesses. For children watching, this subverted the comforting genie archetype, turning magic from something wonderful into something dangerous and corrupting. It evoked fears of loss of control and the dark side of consumerism, making materialism itself feel like a trap that could consume you from within. Napoleon Blown Apart. Through extensive 1970s reruns, Batfink introduced audiences to Napoleon Blown Apart in episode 73, a villain whose obsessive destructiveness hinted at something deeply unstable beneath the comedy. This diminutive figure in a mock Napoleonic uniform, complete with tricorn hat, blue coat, and boots, wielded grenades with alarming fixation. He obsessively destroyed statues with explosives, and when questioned about his motivation, he stated cryptically, "That's what my doctor wants to know," a line that implied psychological instability and mental treatment. His tactics involved tying victims to statues before detonating them, blending slapstick humor with genuine peril in a way that felt uncomfortable. What made Napoleon Blown Apart weirdly terrifying was his unpredictability stemming from apparent incompetence. His fixation on explosives wasn't strategic, it seemed compulsive, making him more hazardous precisely because his actions lacked rational motivation. This evoked fears of real-world instability packaged in a kid-friendly cartoon wrapper, creating cognitive dissonance that lingered long after the 5-minute episode ended. Paper Doll Man. The Impossibles, which aired in 1966 with extensive 1970s reruns, featured the Paper Doll Man in 2 episodes, The Perilous Paper Doll and The Return of the Perilous Paper Man. Voiced by Paul Frees, famous for Boris Badenov, this villain tapped into something primal, body horror through unnatural transformation. Appearing as a lanky, paper-thin figure with angular features and a yellow-white body, the Paper Doll Man possessed the ability to flatten himself to slip under doors or through cracks. He could contort into origami shapes like airplanes for escape, and wielded a sonic staple gun to fire staples or animate office supplies. What made Paper Doll Man weirdly terrifying was the body horror aspect, unnatural flattening that evoked primal distortion fears. Even diluted by comedy and puns, his transformation subverted the human form in ways that felt fundamentally wrong. In his first episode, he stole Plan X from the Pentagon by flattening under doors, and was ultimately defeated by being mailed to prison in his second appearance, caught in a newspaper press. These conclusions, while humorous, couldn't quite erase the disturbing visual of a human body transformed into paper-thin sheets. Brother Goose. Brother Goose appeared in Batfink episodes Brother Goose and Crimes and Rhymes, committing crimes that corrupted something sacred to childhood. Nursery Rhymes. This plump, yellow-skinned figure in a brown trench coat and hat turned innocent bedtime stories into criminal blueprints. He committed jewelry heists themed around nursery rhymes, leaving taunting clues such as using "Mary had a little lamb" to distract or "Jack be nimble" for agile escapes. His crimes involved rhyme-based distractions and gadgets tied to tales, like explosive eggs or web-like threads from Little Miss Muffet. What made Brother Goose weirdly terrifying was how he corrupted childhood familiarity. Turning bedtime stories into crime blueprints created an eerie betrayal. The punny layer couldn't quite mask the subconscious dread of innocence twisted into something sinister. When the stories your parents read you to help you sleep became tools for villainy, it created a dissonance that made the safe feel suddenly dangerous. Gold Unlocks. In Batfink, episode 89, Goldie Unlocks and the Three Bears, audiences encountered a fairy tale turned on its head. Gold Unlocks appeared as a blonde woman in a dress, her innocent facade masking an obsession with locks and lockpicking. She robbed a bank with her henchmen the Three Bears, Philip Phil, Billiam Bill, and Sylvester Sill, creating a criminal enterprise that parodied the beloved children's story. Her powers focused on lockpicking mastery and commanding her bear associates, blending the cuteness of fairy tale references with the menace of actual heists. What made Golden Locks weirdly terrifying was how she subverted beloved tales. Innocence. Becoming sinister evoked unease in familiar narratives gone wrong. She was ultimately defeated by imprisonment in a cell without locks, an ironic justice given her fixation. But the damage was done. The fairy tale had been corrupted, and Goldilocks would never quite feel the same again. Professor Stretch. Professor Stretch, voiced by Paul Frees, appeared in The Impossibles episodes The Wretched Professor Stretch, October 22, 1966, and Professor Stretch Bounces Back, December 10, 1966. This green-skinned, pointy-eared madman in a cloak possessed super elasticity that allowed for disturbing bodily transformations. His powers included limb elongation, squeezing through impossibly small spaces, and forming his body into shapes like balls. He could turn objects rubbery via powder or create monsters from chowder, expanding his threat beyond personal transformation to environmental manipulation. In The Wretched Professor Stretch, he escaped prison and sabotaged a tank with rubber powder, causing havoc before being defeated by the Impossibles, bouncing him like a basketball. What made Professor Stretch weirdly terrifying was the body horror element, unnatural elongations that tapped into distortion fears. Even though comedy diluted the threat with puns and slapstick, the fundamental wrongness of a human body stretching and contorting in impossible ways left an impression that was difficult to shake. Hugo A. Go-Go. Hugo A. Go-Go, voiced by Frank Buxton with a mock German accent, appeared in over 30 episodes of Batfink, more than any other villain in the series. This blue-smocked, wild-haired mad scientist operated from a secret lab, frequently breaking the fourth wall to banter with the narrator. His manic, egocentric personality was exemplified by a signature reused clip of him declaring schemes right into Mind Trap, accompanied by cackling laughter. His inventions were absurdly elaborate yet prone to failure. Brainwashing fluid squirted from a flower, a tickling stick, a laser monocle, a mechanical baby throwing grenades, an ego spray turning Batfink narcissistic, a time stopper for robberies, and a teleportation belt. What made Hugo A. Go-Go weirdly terrifying was his blend of campy failure and relentless menace. Inventions that distorted reality evoked subconscious fears of science gone awry. In the devilish device, he could turn people into animals, fundamentally altering their nature. This wasn't just about defeating a hero, it was about reshaping reality itself in unstable and unpredictable ways, making Hugo simultaneously laughable and genuinely unsettling. Sandman Sam. In Batfink Episode 61, Sandman Sam appeared as a one-off villain who corrupted another comforting childhood figure. This criminal leveraged a folklore-inspired gimmick, Slumber Sand, that induced instant sleep, allowing him to rob stores while victims lay unconscious and helpless. His power even disrupted Batfink's beep radar, turning it to zzzz, forcing the hero to rely on wits rather than technology. In the episode, Sam committed citywide robberies with his sand, creating vulnerability by stripping awareness, ultimately resolved when Batfink and Karate outmaneuvered him. What made Sandman Sam weirdly terrifying was how he subverted the gentle Sandman myth into an invasive predator. The Sandman was supposed to bring peaceful dreams. Instead, Sam's version brought forced helplessness and victimization. It evoked fears of vulnerability and the idea of being attacked while completely defenseless, transforming sleep from a refuge into a liability. Stupid Man. Featured in Batfink Episode 28, Stupid Man was a dim-witted Superman spoof who demonstrated how incompetence could become its own form of terror. This incredibly dumb figure in a crude superhero costume stole items like a $2 million scimitar, or the Maharaja's jewel-studded turban, using tools like a wooden club, foolish choices that somehow succeeded. The twist was his relation as the police chief's brother-in-law, rendering law enforcement powerless and forcing Batfink to intervene. His power wasn't strength or strategy, but unintentional luck from clumsiness, making his next move completely unpredictable. What made Stupid Man weirdly terrifying was how incompetence bred hazardous randomness, satirizing superhero invulnerability. When someone so incompetent kept succeeding through pure accident, it created an unsettling world where logic didn't apply, and danger could come from the most unexpected, idiotic sources. His defeats came via Batfink's cleverness, but the fundamental unpredictability made him more unsettling than many smarter villains. Benita Bazaar. Benita Bazaar, portrayed by comedian Martha Raye in all 17 episodes of The Bugaloos, represented jealousy taken to psychedelic extremes. This ancient, irascible witch lived in a gigantic jukebox, broadcasting obnoxious music while seething over the Bugaloos' melodic success. Her feathered outfits emphasized her flightless envy of the Bugaloos' wings, and her schemes ranged from stealing Joy's voice in The Great Voice Robbery to attempting to amputate IQ's wings in If I Had the Wings of a Bugaloo. She pumped smog into the forest in On a Clear Day and evicted the Bugaloos in The Good Old Days. Her gadgets, like the stereo zapper that rendered victims unconscious, added genuine menace to her comedy. What made Benita Bazaar weirdly terrifying was her obsessive pursuit, blending campy humor with threats of real harm, like wing amputation or enslavement. For children, these threats perverting music and fame into chaos felt invasive and genuinely unsettling, especially when delivered through Martha Raye's talentless loudmouth performance. The Creeper. When Jeepers, It's the Creeper aired on September 26, 1970, it introduced what many consider one of Scooby-Doo's scariest villains. The Creeper appeared as a green-skinned zombie with a hunchback, dark red hair, yellow sclera, and a lopsided face, wearing a dark green trench coat resembling Frankenstein's monster or Rondo Hatton's Creeper from House of Horrors. The plot involved Mystery Inc. finding an injured bank guard who gave them a blank paper before passing out. At a barn dance, the Creeper disrupted events, demanding paper while chasing the gang through rural settings. Eventually revealed as Mr. Carswell, the bank president robbing his own bank, the Creeper's disguise was designed to silence witnesses. What made the Creeper weirdly terrifying was its relentless pursuit. Physical violence and horror tropes like emerging from darkness, been amplified by rural isolation. It demonstrated immense strength, felling trees and attacking guards, making it feel genuinely dangerous. This villain inspired the 1971 computer virus called Creeper and continues inspiring fan art and media references, cementing its status as an icon of cartoon horror. Dr. Lo Hasatodo. Jabberjaw premiered on September 11, 1976 with Dr. Lo Has Got to Go, introducing an evil underwater mastermind threatening cities with his inventions. Set in a futuristic underwater world, the show featured Jabberjaw, a talking shark voiced by Frank Welker, drumming in the band The Neptunes. Dr. Lo developed a growth ray to enlarge sea creatures and mechanical monsters for conquest, endangering underwater civilizations. The Neptunes thwarted his plans involving high-speed chases and battles with enlarged threats, but the damage to young psyches may have already been done. What made Dr. Lo Hasatodo weirdly terrifying was his hubris in tampering with nature, evoking fears of uncontrollable science in an oceanic setting. Coming in the wake of Jaws, this underwater threat tapped into pre-existing aquatic anxieties. His eccentric volatility added comic yet unsettling unpredictability, making him a one-episode villain who nonetheless left an impression of underwater chaos and scientific madness run amok. Zoltar. Battle of the Planets, which aired from 1978 to 1980, adapted science ninja team Gatchaman for Western audiences and introduced Zoltar, voiced by Key Luke. This masked, caped figure in dark armor commanded Spectra's forces under the Luminous One, a ghostly head. Adapted from Berkatza, Zoltar's cultish obedience to the spectral Luminous One created otherworldly dread. His schemes involved planting bombs and attacking cities, often foiled by G-Force, but his enigmatic nature persisted. What made Zoltar weirdly terrifying was his cultish devotion, creating an atmosphere of alien control and mysterious cosmic hierarchy. However, controversies center on how the adaptation sanitized Berkatza's intersex mutation, splitting female forms into separate characters like Mala to avoid gender themes, causing plot inconsistencies and arguably representing cultural misrepresentation of the original's complexity. Commodore Phineas P. Fibber. When Yogi's Gang aired its fourth episode on October 6, 1973, children encountered a villain who embodied something particularly insidious, the corruption of truth itself. Commodore Phineas P. Fibber represented deception in its purest form, a character whose very existence was built upon layers of falsehood that made reality itself feel unstable and unreliable. This villain appeared as a naval officer-styled figure, complete with Commodore's uniform that suggested authority and respectability, the perfect disguise for someone whose every word dripped with dishonesty. His schemes involved weaving elaborate webs of lies that ensnared the honest members of Yogi's crew, exploiting their trusting nature to create chaos through misinformation. What made Commodore Fibber weirdly terrifying was the philosophical horror he represented. In a world where lies were indistinguishable from truth, how could anyone trust their own perceptions? For children watching, this created an unsettling cognitive dissonance. If a respectable-looking authority figure could be completely dishonest, then who could be trusted? His vice of constant lying reflected the post-Watergate era's growing skepticism toward authority figures, making him not just a cartoon villain, but a symbol of institutional betrayal. The episode's resolution, where truth ultimately prevailed through the gang's persistence and moral clarity, offered reassurance, but the damage was done. Commodore Fibber had planted seeds of doubt about the nature of truth itself, making him a villain whose impact extended far beyond his single episode appearance. What all these shows reveal is how the 1970s blurred the line between education and entertainment, sometimes deliberately, sometimes accidentally. The people making these cartoons combined Saturday morning innocence with late-night sensibilities, layering subtle adult influences into stories that were supposed to teach kids about honesty, teamwork, or bravery. And because you were young, you absorbed it all without filtering. Your memory stored the colors, the sounds, the hidden intensity, the strange jokes, the vaguely inappropriate character designs, and the unsettling emotional energy that now makes so much sense in hindsight. That's the real beauty of nostalgia, isn't it? You're not just remembering the shows, you're remembering the version of yourself who watched them. The small you who sat close to the screen. The you who didn't question why the cartoon teacher had such dramatic eyelashes, or why the moral lesson arrived right after a scene that felt too mature, or why you felt a strange twist in your stomach during specific episodes. You grew up in an era where animated education was a wild experiment. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and sometimes it accidentally introduced entire generations to themes they weren't meant to process yet. But somehow, that mixture of innocence and intensity shaped you anyway. It became part of your internal landscape, the quiet archive of childhood moments that surface whenever you see a clip, hear an old theme song, or remember the way morning sunlight hit the TV screen. So now I want to hear from you. When you look back at these cartoons with your adult eyes and child memories intertwined, which one stands out as the most surprising now? Which one felt different when you revisited it? And which one left a mark you didn't fully understand until years later? Share your answer in the comments. And if this journey into the strange, bright, unfiltered world of 1970s educational cartoons unlocked a memory you didn't even realize you still had, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because there are so many more forgotten corners of your past waiting to be explored, and I'm here to help you find every one of them.